following subject matter is real and only intended for mature audiences. Discretion is advised.
People are dead after deputies say a man went on a shooting rampage.
I knew a week before she died I was going to kill her.
I can tell you the scene out there is absolutely horrific.
Nobody knows where this individual may strike next.
This is 10-Minute Murder.
Welcome to 10-Minute Murder, brief and bingeable true crime. My name is Joe, I'm the host, and thanks for joining today. And I have to admit, I feel a little bit off today. I'm frustrated with a situation that I have no control over, and it's affecting me in a big way. Instead of stewing in my own emotions, I thought I'd mention it here and maybe find a friend in suffering. How much of the devil do you have to have in you to not only change the color, but also the recipe of Coke Zero? What was wrong with the black cans? Answer, absolutely nothing. Now there's some sort of ugly shade of red. No thanks. And if that wasn't enough, the flavor is different. Again, no thanks. In protest, I started buying that Sam's Club Cola, the Diet Sam's Club Cola, and it tastes like Walmart soda, which is exactly what it is, so it's fine, I guess. But now I'm going to start auditioning new sodas. And I've been drinking more water lately, and my kidneys are happy about it, but my mouth isn't. And I'm not sure what I'm going to do. Anyway, I know you didn't come here to get depressed with me about my soda struggles. You came here for quick stories about true crime. Hopefully. And before we get to the one today, check out where you're listening right now, and make sure you're subscribed to 10-Minute Murder. You'll never miss an episode if you're subscribed. Also, connect on social media. I post the visuals that go along with the episodes on Facebook and Instagram. Links are in the show notes, or just search 10-Minute Murder within the app. Now, to today's story, which, by the way, will be a 3-part episode. When 33-year-old Chris Watts' whole family suddenly disappeared without a trace on August 13, 2018, the seemingly devastated husband and father of 2 little girls gave a TV interview from his porch in Frederick, Colorado, begging them to come home. However, as the investigation continued, friends and family quickly realized that Chris Watts was not the man he made himself out to be. To understand how a man who once seemed like a perfect father and husband became a family annihilator, we need to take a look at his upbringing. Christopher Lee Watts was born in Fayetteville, North Carolina on May 16, 1985, to Cindy and Ronnie Watts. His sister Jamie was 6.5 years older and often took care of her little brother. Ronnie worked as a part-time manager for the Ford dealership, while Cindy was the secretary and notary. Even though his father was rather quiet and reserved, Chris idolized him from an early age. As Cindy later said, quote, "Ronnie and Chris were so close, they did everything together." Young Chris was really into sports, and so his father would take him to basketball games during the winter and football and baseball games when it was summertime. The two also equally loved NASCAR and went to over 200 races together. It was also Ronnie who taught his son car mechanics, quickly discovering that Chris had a natural talent in the field. But when it came to social life outside of spending time with his father, Chris was the complete opposite of his gregarious sister. Chris was shy and withdrawn, just like his father. In school, Chris was an average student, but would make his parents incredibly proud by bringing home many trophies from different sports. Ronnie made sure to be at every single game to see his son play and cheer from the sidelines. At the age of 14, Chris began his studies at Pine Forest High School, just like his sister and parents had done before him. However, there, Chris became even more withdrawn from his peers. He felt uncomfortable around his schoolmates. Chris kept mostly to himself and was widely ignored. As his sister Jamie said, quote, "He didn't go out with friends. I was more of a social butterfly, and he was quiet and interested in mechanics and cars. He was just a focused person." Cars really seemed to be the thing for Chris, who enrolled in the automotive technology class taught by Joe Duddy. Joe quickly recognized Chris's natural talents and became something of a mentor for him, thinking great things were coming for the young man in the future. Joe would later praise his former student, saying, "It's hard to find a more perfect kid. He was in the top 10% of students I ever had. He was very quiet and introverted, but he was completely polite and courteous. He had a photographic memory, and he could recite anything you wanted to know about NASCAR from memory, and I was very impressed with that." Even though Joe knew how withdrawn and shy Chris was, he was still a little surprised that he never saw Chris speaking to a girl. Joe recalled, "That was one thing I always wondered about. Many times I would look at him and think, what's going on in his head? It was like the wheels were spinning, but he was by himself." There were some schoolmates who got to know Chris a little bit more, and nobody really had anything bad to say. He was described as smart and gentle and almost too easygoing. Lance Alfonso, who played football with Chris, said, quote, "I've never seen him get angry at anybody. He wouldn't hurt a fly." And that statement didn't really age well. Chris was really an easy child for his parents, too. Unlike his older sister, Chris never rebelled or caused trouble. Still, Jamie often wondered if there was something wrong with her brother. "I really thought he was autistic, like he was on the spectrum. He had to get things in order. It was his mannerisms. It was hard to hold a conversation with him unless we were talking about cars." In May 2003, Chris graduated from Pine Forest High School and was given a pep talk from his teacher, Joe Duddy. Chris had been awarded a $1,000 scholarship to the NASCAR Technical Institute in Mooresville, and Joe was sure he would go far. Quote, "He had everything going for him. I told him, 'Chris, if I ever had a student who was going to be tremendously successful, it's you.' I was sure that one day I was going to read about him being a crew chief of a NASCAR team." And so Chris left home to study in Mooresville and rarely came back. For his father, the situation hit hard. The two had been so close before, spending almost all their spare time together. As Chris said, Ronnie was his hero and best friend, but now studying and working part-time, he was too busy to come see his father. As a result, and to feel better, Ronnie began using drugs, especially cocaine. His addiction grew so strong he ended up using lots of money, so much that his wife Cindy eventually began to suspect that he was having an affair. When she confronted Ronnie, he finally confessed he was hooked on cocaine because he was so depressed after Chris left. So you can imagine how closed off Ronnie was with his feelings. He'd rather snort drugs than open his mouth, and how much of that mentality transferred to Chris. Cindy eventually told Chris and Jamie what was going on, and after a family intervention, Ronnie quit right then and there. In 2006, Chris graduated from the NASCAR Institute with honors and found a full-time job with the Mooresville Ford dealership as a service technician. However, Chris still dreamed of working for NASCAR, but after a stream of job applications and only one interview without it going anywhere, he felt like his dream was shattered. Chris stayed with Ford. After all, he was making pretty good money, so it was possible for Chris to buy himself a nice hot rod Mustang and even save a little bit for the future. Around this time, Chris also had his first ever steady girlfriend, or so he thought. The woman in question had just gone through a messy divorce, and Chris just worked as a band-aid. As soon as she felt better, she went off with someone else. Seeing Chris struggle with women, his cousin, Nicole Canaday, encouraged him to send a Facebook friend request to her work colleague, Shanann Ruschek. Shanann was born in New Jersey, January 10, 1984, to Sandra and Frank, who named their daughter after Sha Na Na, the popular 60s rock and roll doo-wop group. 2 years later, Shanann's brother Frankie was born. The two formed a strong bond growing up. Very unlike Chris, Shanann always stood out with her vibrant personality, and yet she was insecure and she was bullied in school. So Frankie became her protector, getting into numerous fights on his sister's behalf. Then around 1999, the family moved to Aberdeen, North Carolina, where job prospects were better. Shanann began her freshman year at Pinecrest High School and also joined Matt Francis's theater class. There, Shanann found her lost confidence and a new set of friends. To Matt and her classmates, Shanann would tell all about her horrible home life. She would tell stories about her parents going through a bitter divorce, even though Frank and Sandy were still together, almost 40 years of marriage. Shanann actually spent so much time in Matt's office pouring out her problems that the school principal had to intervene. They sent her to the guidance counselor, but Shanann kept going back to Matt. When he left Pinecrest High School in 2002 to get married, Shanann wrote Matt a letter, quote, "You've been like a father figure to me, even more than my own father." In her senior year, Shanann started dating a fellow student named Leonard King. The relationship developed fast, and the two were engaged by the time Shanann graduated, and soon after they got married. As a friend of hers recalls, she was adamant about starting her life and having a family. They got married so quickly, and she was so young and very ambitious. But as fast as the marriage started, it soon began to fall apart. Shanann had dropped out of college to take care of Leonard so that he could go to law school. When she eventually became a manager at Dirty South, Shanann stopped coming home at night, not telling Leonard where she had been. Marriage counseling had been little to no help, and so the two divorced in 2007. For the next 3 years, Shanann's life would have big ups and downs. First, she would build her own $309,000 house overlooking Lake Wylie in the Charlotte suburb of Belmont, while earning almost $500,000 a year. But as soon as she moved in, she got terribly sick. Her hair was falling out, and she lost 20 pounds in a month. When Shanann finally agreed to see a doctor, she was eventually diagnosed with lupus and fibromyalgia in May 2010. She said, "I was completely lost. I was not feeling good. I was in a dark place. I was really sad, emotional, and I didn't know where to turn." Soon after, Shanann quit her job, not knowing what was going on in her life. Then, just when she felt like she had hit the lowest point, Shanann received a second Facebook message from a man named Chris Watts. Thinking she didn't have anything to lose, this time Shanann answered. It was far from love at first sight. The first couple of dates were awkward, especially because of Chris's social anxiety, but Shanann kept giving him another chance. Then, after spending a day together at Myrtle Beach, Shanann had a lupus flare-up on the drive back home. He let me lay his head on him, and I fell asleep for 3.5 hours on his lap while he had to pee. That was the moment when Shanann knew that she had found the man of her dreams. And so Chris and Shanann got married Saturday, November 3rd, 2012, promising till death do us part. However, nobody knew that that day would come much sooner than expected. That's 10-Minute Murder for today. Brief and bingeable true crime. Thanks for joining part 1 of this 3-part series. The next one will cover the disappearance of Shanann Watts and her children, as well as the arrest of Chris Watts. Before you go, make sure you're subscribed to 10-Minute Murder so that you don't miss any future episodes. Also, connect with 10-Minute Murder on Facebook and Instagram. Links for that are in the show notes of this episode or inside Facebook and Instagram. Go to the search bar and type 10-Minute Murder, and it'll pop right up. Thanks for listening to 10-Minute Murder. Stay safe and good night.